According to multiple news articles, the United States government has shut down on September 30th, 2025. I'm Unique Lamia, also known as Mia, a dual degree graduate student studying public administration and criminal justice, and I'm going to shed some knowledge/light on what I have learned in my classes on why I believe that the government has shut down based on my research, what this means, and what the potential timeline looks like. It should be noted, all information that I am telling you are based on textbooks that I've read in my classes, my professors speaking, me taking notes in class, and academic journal articles. As I always say, laws are constantly being passed and implemented, so if I say something and it may be outdated, just know that I took this class last semester in the spring, so I would be fairly confident if some laws pass, but at the same time, it is Congress and they have been following the same laws for a while now. According to CNN, they said the government shutdown. The federal government has officially shut down for the first time in 6 years after a deadlocked Congress failed to pass a funding measure to keep the lights on, and no one inside the Capitol knows what will happen next. I do think they know what will happen next. The news probably fluffed that up a little bit for a dramatic purpose, but government shutdowns or lack of approved budget is more common than you may think throughout the United States history. So Congress is essentially the federal government in the United States, and they have something known as the fiscal year, which exists. Fiscal years for the federal government runs from October 1st to September 30th. So since they said the government shutdown happened on September 30th, what most likely happened, Congress, they did not come to a budget that they were like, we all approve of this budget, it's going to be passed, it's going to be implemented, and then the federal money that was passed, some of it's going to be allocated to all the 50 states in the United States, various departments for discretionary spending as well as mandatory spending. So mandatory spending in the field of government/public administration is essentially spending that is mandatory. We could think about it as food. If you are an individual who lives your life, mandatory spending, you have to pay your bills for food, you have to pay your bills to obtain housing, your rent, your mortgage, whatever that is, and sometimes you have to pay your bills to like get medical treatments, if you need glasses, if you need clothes, things like that. Those are mandatory spendings. So in the world of the government, mandatory spendings are like spending that is allocated to the military, to Medicaid, Social Security, and unemployment benefits. Those are mandatory spending things. So even though this government has shut down, those things will still be funded for the American people. Whereas things like discretionary spending, if there is no leftover money from the previous fiscal year budget, there may be a small or a brief pause on the funding of some of those initiatives. So it can probably be like an after-school program for children. There's probably going to be a slight pause in that with discretionary spending if there's no money, because it's not categorized into mandatory spending. It can be things based on science research, like for global warming, if that's not considered to be mandatory spending in society. In an ideal world, we would think as people in society that the United States government in a budget, that Congress, when they distribute the money, these federal agencies and etc., that they would not spend all the money out at the fiscal year. So things like this, a complete government shutdown where they're saying we have no money left, would be avoided. However, when budgets are approved, particularly for the federal government, they know that they are going to receive more money in the future. So what oftentimes happens, government agencies, when they receive money for a fiscal year towards the end of the budget cycle or towards the end of the fiscal year, if they have millions or thousands of dollars left over, what often happens, they recklessly spend it because they want more money in the future. So if you have leftover money, like if they had leftover money today from the previous fiscal year, today's October 1st, from the previous fiscal year, which ended on September 30th, yesterday, then when they're going through this new budget approval cycle and phase, they would honestly be giving less money because they're saying you didn't spend out all the money from the previous fiscal year. So that is why reckless spending often happens And that's why today they are saying there is no money in the federal government and a government shutdown has occurred on October 1st. So what normally happens when a fiscal budget is approved? There is something known as obligations, and this is money spent on a certain way or for a specific purpose, and the exact money that will be spent is oftentimes specified. So this is being specific, saying that the federal government money is going to be allocated to the Department of Defense, for example, and they're going to spend that money on cars, and they're going to spend like $50,000 on cars. So that's obligations, but could happen in a budget, right? So before we jump into describing what is going to happen next with Congress, it's important to understand the budget cycle and why they're often late with this and why this isn't necessarily a cause for panic currently based on my studies. But there's something known as the Appropriations Authority. And when we're looking at this Appropriations Authority, this is the actual money that Congress approves to be spent, right? This is the authority that Congress gives to the federal government agencies and different committees and groups that they can say you can spend this money. And generally there are 13. Historically, there has been 13 appropriation bills, right? So some money is distributed to housing, some money is distributed to defense, and etc. This has not happened yet, which is why we are seeing multiple news articles as to say the government is shut down, the government is shut down. This has not happened. There's also the authority to borrow money, and this is where Congress is giving authority to borrow money. So this is also a form of actually spending the money. And this is next, there's something known as contract authority. So this is writing a contract. So this is when different departments, they're writing contracts, they're outsourcing services, or they're lending money to different agencies. They known as the entitlement authority, and this is automatically applied to things like Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security. So these are mandatory spending that's occurring. There's something known as the government loans of money. So this can be for FAFSA for schools, and these are loans, and this includes guaranteed authority. So when you apply for the FAFSA, if you're a college student, grad student, things like that, this is where that money is laid out, or the category government loans money. Appropriations, I've said appropriations a lot, right? Appropriations is the estimate of how the budget will be spent. So it includes an upper limit or an upper estimate of how much money each department thinks they're going to spend for each agency. But the caveat is this has to be approved. So each agency, there's about 13 of them, right? So all 13 agencies, they have to write a report and a budget document essentially estimating how much money they want and how much money they want to spend for the next fiscal year, right? But all members of Congress has to agree with that. And the budget cycle, particularly as it relates to the federal government and approving budgets or disapproving budgets, is very political in nature, which is why it is oftentimes late, because it takes a while for individuals in Congress to agree on how much money they're going to allocate to each department. Main reason why we are seeing multiple news articles saying the whole government has shut down because Congress did not approve the budget is because Congress authorizes the money for all branches of government. The judicial, the legislative, and the executive branch. Congress is historically the individuals who authorizes all the money that is going to be spent. And oftentimes the executive agencies, they do spend the most money. So in an ideal world, to ensure that budgets are approved by October 1st or September 30th so they can be implemented for the new fiscal year with no delays, Congress would follow the Congressional Budget and Impoundment Control Act of 1974. And this act lays specific guidelines on when budgets should be occurred. So it starts with different agencies, various government and federal agencies. They start working on their budget in July with estimated costs. So they have to add or remove various stuff. After that, the budget is sent to the Office of OMB, United States Office of Management Budget. This is essentially where the budget is sent to from various state agencies. They're put into one and they're sent there. Then on the first Monday of February, the president sends the budget to Congress. After, Congress is meant to have the budget resolution on April 15th and it has been late 30 times in the past 49 years approximately. So this is where the House and the Senate, they look at all the various compoundments and all 13 appropriation bills, and it's edited, it's marked up. They're saying, I don't want this, we want this, we agree with this, we don't want. So it's a lot, okay? It's a lot that happens. So the markup is a lengthy process as well. It includes budgets, hearings, they have to fact check things. They are sensitive to staff changes, things like that. So markup is generally a long time. After markup occurs, the president will sign the 13 appropriation bills by October 1st, and then the federal budget is thus implemented for the next fiscal year. But these are where problems arise. And when problems like this arise, this contributes to things like government shutdowns, news articles such as that. So this is where, as I said earlier, budgets are political documents. They're very sensitive. So one service is often prioritized over the other, and trade-offs are often made. So there's no solutions, there's only trade-offs. So they're saying, okay, if it's political, one party wants to fund this more, they're going to do that. However, the other thing is just going to fall down. Also have to control for out of control spending. And out of control spending, according to my studies, is the foundation of the American government, because we are constantly increasing spending because budgets are sensitive to inflation. There's also something known as debt ceiling limits, and this is where Congress sets a limit on the amount of money that can be borrowed. So this is a reason why government shutdowns often occur, to control out of control spending. Failure to meet the October 1st deadline. Historically, according to my studies, the October 1st deadline has only been met 4 times throughout history. And those 4 times include, for the fiscal year, for 1971, 1989, 1995, and 1997, all right? So I say this to say, there should be no cause for a lot of panic currently in 2025, because this has happened historically. It's very rare that Congress meets the October 1st deadline for passing that fiscal year budget, right? So we have something known as the continuous resolution. And continuous resolutions, they often occur because there's a failure to meet the deadline. So the failure to meet the deadline, right? Now you can say we are somewhat in a continuous resolution today as of October 1st. So this is where Congress, what's going to happen in the future? Congress is going to authorize spending until November 2nd, right? So that news article from CNN earlier, CNN said, no one inside the Capitol knows what will happen, right? To quote CNN's words. That's what they said. Congress does know what's going to happen. There's going to be a continuous resolution, and because they failed to meet the deadline. And in this continuous resolution, Congress is going to authorize spending until November 2nd. So the federal government is not going to be shut down in the United States indefinitely, guys, okay? Congress knows what's going to happen. And this is where they are going to extend the old fiscal year budget for 6 weeks, right? So the fiscal year budget that just ended today, or yesterday, fiscal year budget that ended yesterday, they're going to extend that for 6 weeks. And there's no time limit on any amount that Congress can agree on, right? And then what's going to happen ultimately in the long run after, because that extension is only going to be for 6 weeks, there's going to be something known as an omnibus spending bill. And this omnibus spending bill is where Congress will appoint a small subcommittee or a small committee of 3 to 4 people. And those people are going to essentially do the job of Congress, and they're going to negotiate for a fiscal bill to be passed, right? So they're going to work on all the various budgets together, and they're going to approve an amount for one bill for all 13 bills, and then this will then be sent to the president, and then it's going to be signed and divided up into federal agencies. The only caveat with this is because, as I said, Congress isn't necessarily people doing this, because it's only a group of 3 to 4 people, and that means that each section of the bill, or each section of the 13 appropriation bills, it's not going to be looked at critically, right? So they'll probably they'll probably look at the past fiscal year budgets that was passed for like the last 5 years, and then they'll like estimate for inflation for like 2025, 2026, and they're probably going to come up with a large, crazy number, like $1 billion, probably, maybe more. Okay, $1 billion is not enough in the United States. I don't think they're going to distribute that to all the 13 appropriation bills, and thus the federal government or the United States government will no longer be shut down. That was essentially a crash course on government shutdowns as it relates to the government shutdown that occurred on September 30th, 2025, and what is going to happen for the future. So hopefully you learned something from this video. I try to share my knowledge on what I am learning in graduate school when I'm able to do so. And I saw multiple news articles about this on TikTok, and I was like, hey, I learned about this in school. And remember, guys, if you are like, hey, I don't like this, I don't like that Congress is unable to pass the fiscal year budget on time, things like that. Remember, you as constituents, individuals in society, you have power. Your power in society as constituents includes making choices to go out and vote. You can run for office. You can do various things like that, right? So this video was not political in nature at all. It was just to educate y'all. I do hope you enjoyed. And remember, consider liking the video, following along, and have a great day. Stay positive. Bye. Thank you so much for watching.